We Americans love our food, don't we? We love our food. And it really doesn't seem to matter what part of society that you're looking at. We obsess about what we eat and about what other people eat as well. Whoever the president is, we know what his favorite food is, his favorite candy, his favorite ice cream, because we obsess about this kind of thing. If you want to strike up a conversation with a stranger, talk to them about the weather or ask them what their favorite restaurant is. Boom, either one, you're in, okay? That's all it takes. Just, we love to talk about food. In 1993, when Bill Clinton took office as president, it was noted that pizza orders to the White House were up 31% over George H.W. Bush's administration's, his White House's pizza orders. 31%. Meat top pizzas specifically were up 69% over Bush's administration. And they also figured out that when Hillary was on an announced out-of-town trip, you know, if it's not announced, then they didn't necessarily know it and they couldn't track this. But if it was announced that Hillary was out of town, they knew for a fact pizza orders to the White House went up another 18%. So, I don't know. We can make whatever we want out of that, I guess, but just kind of interesting. Now, this next is not connected to any president, but it's a pizza thing. Domino's franchises have noted that there's a real uptick in pizza deliveries to fat farms, they called them, and health spas after midnight. What are we doing here, folks? I think we're cheating. I think that's what's going on. There was a poll taken about the main problems facing our world. Man, there's a lot of things to choose from. Drugs, immorality, violence, hunger. No, the number one problem was dogs running loose in the neighborhood. Yeah. Number two, how to lose weight. In a land of plenty, I guess, yeah, we do tend to eat too much. We may have more food here in America than most other countries, but issues surrounding food are not unique to this country. Paul says, now about food sacrificed to idols. We know that we all possess knowledge. Knowledge puffs up, but love builds up. The man who thinks he knows something does not yet know as he ought to know. But the man who loves God is known by God. So then, about eating food sacrificed to idols, we know that an idol is nothing at all in the world, and that there's no God but one. For even if there are so-called gods, whether in heaven or on earth, as indeed there are many many gods and many lords, yet for us there's but one God, the Father, from whom all things came, and for whom we live. And there is but one Lord, Jesus Christ, through whom all things came and through whom we live. But not everyone knows this. Some people are still so accustomed to idols that when they eat such food, they think of it as having been sacrificed to an idol. And since their conscience is weak, it's defiled. But food does not bring us near to God. We're no worse if we do not eat, and no better if we do. Be careful, however, that the exercise of your freedom does not become a stumbling block to the weak. For if anyone with a weak conscience sees you who have this knowledge eating in an idol's temple, won't he be emboldened to eat what's been sacrificed to idols? So this weak brother for whom Christ died is destroyed by your knowledge. When you sin against your brothers in this way and wound their weak conscience, you sin against Christ. Therefore, if what I eat causes my brother to fall into sin, I will never eat meat again, so that I will not cause him to fall. Food was their issue, but it can be anything, can't it? Doesn't have to be food that causes problems. So let's try to understand a little bit of what was going on here. A lot of the early Christians had been pagans before they became Christians. And that means that they may have offered sacrifices to idols. They may have sacrificed a bull to Baal or some other god. And, then there's the meat, and maybe that meat was eaten by the family. But then they gave their hearts to Christ. Now they don't worship idols anymore, but they might still have good friends that haven't made that commitment yet. They might have good friends that are still worshiping idols. So they go to this friend's house, and the friend sets in front of them big, juicy steaks. Now they have a problem. Were these steaks from a bull that was sacrificed to some idol? If they eat this meat, will they automatically be guilty of worshiping that idol against their own will? Paul, who wrote 1 Corinthians, what we read, was aware of this dilemma, but on the surface, he considered it a non-issue. It's no big deal, okay? Eat the food, ask no questions, keep your heart pure. That's a summary of what Paul's personal opinion was, but it's bigger than that, isn't it? And Paul acknowledges that. We all have a conscience. And something that violates that conscience, that can be a problem. So Paul said it'd be better just don't eat the meat. He said, I won't eat the meat if it's going to be a stumbling block to somebody else. The divide was real, and the solution was real. We can see what can divide a church. And it's not good. But the solution was real because we also are responsible for each other. True, as Christians, we're responsible for reaching out to the world, people who don't know Christ, teaching them about Christ and salvation, Jesus on the cross, yes. But we have a responsibility for each other as well. Different ones of us have different levels of spiritual maturity, and so therefore different levels of understanding what it means to be a Christian. Everyone's at a different spot. Paul's advice to the mature is, give in to the weak. And we don't like that. We like to win. You don't want to give in. You want to be the one that wins. But what actually constitutes winning in this situation? Getting your own way or helping people grow in Christ? I want to introduce you to a guy named Gordon MacDonald. Gordon MacDonald has been a Christian minister, author, and speaker for decades. He told about something that he saw once. He was living in an apartment in New York City, in a high-rise, okay? That's kind of important to the story here, because one day he was sitting on the balcony outside his apartment, however many stories high, and he had his binoculars out, and he was looking out across the traffic and looking at the river way off in the distance and everything. And I know if you and I are sitting on our front porch and we got the binocs out, we're looking at deer running across the field. But in New York, they're looking at traffic or whatever, I guess. So he's, just looking around, and he noticed something happen. He noticed a green van way out there. It pulled off to the side of the road, obviously had engine problems. And the driver just literally got out of the van and walked away. Didn't even raise the hood, didn't do anything, just walked away. And he's like, well, that's kind of weird. And the rest of that day, he kept going back and looking. Yeah, that van's still there. He's just kind of curious about it. He couldn't do anything about it because he said where that van was broken down out there was about an hour's drive from his apartment. And that's the part that I have trouble putting my head around, because I can't see an hour's drive from my house, you can't see that far. But he was up so high, and traffic is so bad in New York, he knew for me to get down there to help that guy, it's going to take an hour. So all he could do was sit there on his balcony and see what happened. Well, he watched that driver just walk away, and every hour or so, he's checking on it. Oh, van's still there. Next morning, it was still there. And while he had his binoculars on it, he noticed a car pull up behind it. And he's like, oh, the owner of the van found a mechanic to come help or whatever. But it wasn't the owner of the van, or wasn't the guy who'd been driving the van. Guy got out, got in the van. A couple minutes later, the guy got back out of the van with the radio. And not too long after that, someone else, 2 more guys pulled up behind that van, and they left with 4 tires. By the second morning, a door was gone, as well as the front seat and a window. By the third day, the engine was gone. And in typical preacher fashion, Gordon MacDonald watched this transpire, and he realized this is an illustration of what has happened to this once pristine planet that we live on. God created the earth to be a paradise. Sin was introduced, and the radio disappeared. Sin was repeated, and the tires were gone. And soon, the world is spinning out of control. I'm just going to let you watch that because you're not going to hear a thing I say while that's happening. There. And now, thousands of years later, any effort to rebuild or replace any missing parts or whatever is just met with more destructive behavior. It's what happens when the world starts spinning out of control. Instead of tearing each other apart, people, what we need to do is we need to act responsibly toward each other, because we have a responsibility toward each other. We need to take into consideration what our words and our actions could do to somebody else. Sometimes we may have to forego our own wishes, maybe even our own needs, for the benefit of somebody else. Remember Paul's argument about the meat sacrificed to idols. Because sometimes, folks, we just need to sacrifice for each other. That's really the point, isn't it? Give up something that you want or something that you need, just so it's not going to harm another person's walk with Christ. There was a guy walking down the street after dark, and he noticed way off in the distance like a flashlight, and it seemed to be moving in a very unsteady fashion. It was obviously being carried by somebody, but he thought maybe it almost looks like the person carrying that's either sick or maybe they're drunk. As they got closer, though, he realized that neither one was the case. He realized that this guy walking toward him, in one hand, he had a flashlight. In the other hand, he had a white-tipped cane. And when they approached each other, this guy asked this man, he said, "Why would a blind man need a flashlight?" And the guy said, "I carry my light not so that I can see, but so that others can see me, and I won't become a stumbling block to anybody." I hear that, and it kind of reminds me of why you put your headlights on a foggy day. Doesn't help you see, but what's it do? Helps you be seen. That's why you do that. You're doing it so that you don't cause a problem. And that's Paul's argument here. What kind of a sacrifice might you be needing to make for your fellow Christians so that you don't be a stumbling block? I mean, maybe you think it's okay to take a nip every once in a while. Maybe it is. But what if another Christian's bothered by that? Maybe you think it's okay to skip church if it's not convenient for you to go. What if another Christian's bothered by that? Maybe you think it's okay to let someone else's money carry the load in the local church. But what if someone else is bothered by that? Or what if everyone else is thinking the same thing? Oh, somebody will do it. And then nobody does. These can be actual sacrifices that we make for the good of other people. We are here today, in this building, in this community today, because people who've come before us made a sacrifice, made a series of sacrifices. I mentioned a few years ago, my home church, Gateway Christian Church in St. Louis County, celebrated their 50th anniversary, kind of like we had our 150th a couple weeks ago. They had their 50th anniversary, and they had, like we did, had a very big special program and everything. And the founding minister, a man named Paul Newland, came back and spoke. The church is 50 years, that congregation is 50 years old. And at the time, 3 years ago, when they had their 50th anniversary, they were on their second preacher. 2, okay? Paul Newland, for 35 years, I think, and then a guy who had worked as an associate under Paul for several years named Carl Shadd was, at that point, the preacher. Carl has now, I think, kind of retired, and they're on their 53 years, they're on their third preacher. I don't know about that place. I think they're having, isn't that amazing? But Paul Newland got up and he spoke. And he told some of the history. And I've shared this particular thing before. How long ago did that fall down there? 5 seconds ago? Okay. It's the cap for the batteries, so hopefully I can keep them in. Paul Newland made the comment, explained that when they were having leadership meetings 45 years ago, 48 years ago, whatever, they didn't even have a building yet. When I was going there, we were meeting in a school in the cafeteria on Sundays. People had to get there early and take down the cafeteria tables and set up chairs. And then after church, well, we know, we understand, they had to do that every Sunday because they had to set it back up for school on Monday. And he said over and over again, what we would say was, we are making decisions for people we haven't met yet. 3 years ago, I saw hundreds of those people that they hadn't met yet back in the 70s. But they're there now because sacrifices were made. People did things for other people. Who are we to think that we can have a vital faith without sacrificing a little bit of who we are, without sacrificing a little bit of what we treasure? It's going to help other people, possibly people we haven't met yet. Who are we to think that we can have a vital faith without that? I mean, remember, Jesus made the ultimate sacrifice for us. Several years ago, there was a church in this part of the state that they tore down their old, yet very historic church building and built a brand new facility. In order to do that, they had to buy houses next door to the old church because they needed to be able to still worship in the old place until the new place was built. So they just bought 2 or 3 lots, I think, next door to them so they could move everything. And I know one of the couples that sold their house. Where their living room was is now where the stage is, okay? And I worked with a lady who went to that church. And I was talking about that. Yeah, so-and-so, they lost their house. They had to sell their house and move. They actually just moved across the street, but they had to move. Moving is moving. They had to give up, a lot of stuff. She said, yeah, they sure made the ultimate sacrifice. And I thought, yes, they had to give up the house they'd raised their kids in. The house they were familiar with. Yes, they had to give up a lot of stuff. They had to move. But I had trouble thinking of what they did as the ultimate sacrifice. You understand what I'm saying? Jesus' sacrifice for us was the ultimate sacrifice. He gave all so that we can have all as well. He didn't look at what was good for him, what he wanted. He gave. That is a real sacrifice. What kind of a sacrifice are you capable of making for others? We're going to sing the invitation. The invitation hymn is the opportunity to look in. What am I supposed to be doing? What's God trying to tell me? I mean, maybe he's trying to tell you need to become Christian. Maybe he's trying to tell you your faith has been sitting, running on idle for 40 years, and it's time. I don't know what he's trying to tell you, but he's got a message for each of us.